Will Witt, thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
So, you're barely 24 years old, and a few years ago, and you can correct me if I get any part of your bio wrong, but you were fed up with what can be considered leftist indoctrination in college, so you dropped out. Today, your videos on PragerU have gotten literally hundreds of millions of views, and you are becoming one of the most recognizable faces of the conservative movement. So I just wanted to start by asking, how does it feel to be having such a large impact at such a young age?
It's hard to quantify, man. I mean, like, you talk about the, 300 million views on my videos, and it's like, imagining 300 million people in a room or something actually watching the videos is, like, insane to me. It's hard to even imagine that those things are happening, but just the fact that I'm able to be a role model for so many people and change so many people's minds and educate people it's truly the most wonderful and amazing thing. And, my life growing up and not being a conservative, being more of an atheist as well, and definitely not living my life to the fullest as someone who would be considered a role model, and now being able to be that for people and changing things around is just, it's absolutely incredible, and I feel blessed every single day.
That's great. So I'm curious, you mentioned that you used to be a liberal. I understand, I read some of your interviews and biographies online that your parents were quite liberal. You grew up in Denver suburbs, correct?
Yeah, Denver suburbs. So I mostly just grew up with my mom. My dad was actually never in the picture. My mom was more liberal, but she wasn't that much of a liberal. She voted for Obama, but I think she kind of just thought he was cool. Like a lot of people did, they didn't really even know what was going on at that time. But all the values that it turned out that she taught me growing up about hard work and personal responsibility, tenacity, I mean, they turned out to be all conservative values. So when I got to college, being on the left and then realizing that the common sense values that I had were actually conservative values, it really woke me up to the fact that, like, wow, I've been being lied to this entire time. And so that's part of the reason why I really went so hard and, changed everything that I did.
That's so interesting. I've heard a lot of young people and college students in particular kind of have a similar experience to you, that they don't realize they're conservatives until they go on college campus. But was there any particular moment that stands out to you where you felt like, all right, I may not belong here, or I may not believe what these people want me to believe?
There's a few. I mean, the one that's sticking out to me as recently I've been thinking about, because I was just talking about it, was I was, for our political science class, they said, the TA at the event, or at the class, she was very leftist, and she said, if you go to a political event or a protest or something, and you write a one-page paper about it, we'll give you extra credit, and you can come in and get this extra credit. I was like, perfect. So I was going to go to an event for Milo Yiannopoulos, if you remember who that guy was a couple of years ago. This was back in, 2015, I think? So I was going to go to a Milo event, and I went to the event, I wrote the one-page paper, and she said, no, this doesn't count. I said, why not? She said, oh, well, it has to be one of these approved events. Some of the approved events were protests against the Keystone Pipeline. They were Democrat politician events, and all just left-wing causes. So if you went to a conservative event or something that was different from their agenda, then that wouldn't count. But if you went to something they approved of course that counts. So it's all about staying with the agenda and staying on their brand. And if you don't, you get shamed for it or not allowed to do what all the other students were doing. And so that moment was like, they treat these people horribly. And it really opened my eyes up.
Treat conservative-minded people, or do you think it's just anybody who doesn't really subscribe to the, liberal leftist orthodoxy?
Yeah, it's not just conservative thought. I mean, it's definitely just anyone who doesn't subscribe to that leftist mindset. It is, I mean, look at someone like J.K. Rowling, who has been someone who's been championed as a leftist basically her entire life, pushing for these kind of things, and then she comes out against one thing about, women being women and such. And she gets completely lambasted by the left and canceled and pushed away. And it's like it only takes one thing, disagreeing with these people, for them to try and utterly cancel you. So you can even be a leftist and you go against it.
Right. I'm starting to believe, like they say this in right-wing, I guess, or conservative intellectual circles a lot these days, is that they're starting to differentiate between what is a leftist and then what is a liberal. A leftist is this modern day, let's cancel everybody who doesn't agree, every single one of these, kind of radical tenets oftentimes. Whereas a liberal is somebody like, they might believe like government certainly has a role to play. In some cases, like alleviate poverty, big government, they're less skeptical. They're probably more skeptical of, for example, capitalism, but they still believe in the fundamentals of American society, like free speech for everybody. ACLU, for example, Southern Poverty Law Center, they used to defend neo-Nazis, marching on the streets, saying that, you know what, like we despise these people, but we certainly trust, like, they have, like, we trust in what they have to say. The ACLU of today, I think, is now no longer liberal. I think it's leftist, and that goes for a lot of the professors, a lot of the academy, a lot of people who we see on the left side of the political spectrum today.
Oh yeah, I mean that's definitely the truth. I mean, look at I go on ACLU's Twitter account all the time, and it's just absolute garbage every single day. Something new about how men can have babies, or that men are having periods. Some weird, just very leftist, gender, weird stuff. I mean, these people don't represent the values that they represent at all. They don't believe in free speech. So we've seen a massive shift from people actually being more liberal, like you said, and supporting things like free speech, the ability for everyone to be able to speak their mind, the Second Amendment, to complete leftism, which is complete, these places where there's government control, hate speech is outlawed. It's been a total shift from moderate to far left.
Now, do you feel like, because you're very young, obviously, and I imagine a lot of your, viewers and fans are young. Do you feel like this kind of like this generation of children who are raised in this environment, like a kind of cancel culture, now this is when they're coming of age, do you think that a lot of them might just actually be turned off by it, and as a result, like, maybe become, fans of yours, even if they don't consider themselves conservative or anything, but they just, have a problem with what they see as like the alternative, like the Democratic Party leftist alternative today?
Yeah, I definitely see that. I mean, I know for a fact that I have lots of fans who aren't really even political, but they just like to watch my videos for a different point of view or just something different to watch. So I definitely think that's the case. I mean, but it's hard because you have something like cancel culture, and of course, I would say the majority of people aren't a fan of cancel culture, but how do you speak out against cancel culture without getting canceled yourself? So, imagine you're some Gen Z kid in middle school, high school, maybe early college, and you speak out against this, you are now at risk of being canceled. So maybe even if on the internet, on some anonymous Twitter profile, they disagree with it, in real life, in the real world, they're not speaking out against it or actually pushing against things like this. So it's tough that people have to live these kind of double lives of being leftists and conservatives at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And I can only imagine that people have tried to cancel you. Is that a correct assumption?
That is correct. But from growing, when I started out doing this, in about 2015, and to where I am now, there's so many people nowadays who talk about saying, oh, it's so hard to be a conservative and we can't stand up for ourselves and it's really difficult. You'll get canceled if you stand up as a conservative. It's like, I get that. Okay, that definitely happens. But I've been strong about what I believe in the entire time I've been doing this. Every single time. My political science classes, my sociology classes, with my friends, with people out on the street. Every single time I've been strong and never sacrificed my values. And I've been able to be so successful because of that. When you apologize to the mob or you give in to these people, you are only making things worse. California as a state, of course, is doing poorly in a lot of ways because of leftist policies. I made a documentary about this, Fleeing California. But it's because conservatives have been too weak to stand up and do something about it because they're too afraid to actually stand against the left. And that is the biggest fault of conservatives, being too scared and us pushing this culture of that it's so hard to be a conservative. We can't say that anymore. We need to breathe strength into these people, not fear.
Right, and I think that, conservatives and young conservatives, but people, everywhere around the culture, because they are everywhere and oftentimes they are called the silent majority, they should have, I think, if they truly believe in the rightness of their arguments and they are conservative for the right reasons, not for bad reasons, right, that the left often wants to paint them as, but for good reasons, right, which I think I would trust both of us. That's probably why we believe that the reason we're conservative is because it's the moral thing to do. But I think if more people on the right, especially young people, held the confidence that, hey, it's okay if people disagree with you, as long as you're coming, from the right place, and your heart is in the right place. And it doesn't matter if they say that you're sexist, racist, xenophobic, whatever. You believe what's truly in your heart. And I think that would go a long way, honestly, just in terms of getting the conversation more out there.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's like, who cares what these people think? It's like people talk about, oh, I'm going to lose friends if I come out and say that I support the president or that, I'm conservative. It's like, screw those people. Like, you want those people as your friends if they're not willing to be your friends anymore just because you have a difference of political opinion? Like, that's not someone who you really want as a friend anyway. That's what I say to them. You're better off. Like, think about Goya Beans. Goya Beans was this big company that, people had heard of, but not a lot of conservatives maybe, or I don't know. Regardless, it was just a normal company. They come out and say they support the president, the left tries to cancel them, but they end up getting so much business from conservative people because of what they said and came out and did. It's like they're now better off for it. Even though it's scary right at the beginning when the left comes out and says, we want to cancel Goya Beans, you betrayed Hispanics, but now conservatives are coming out buying tons of Goya products, and they're doing better than ever. It's like, this is what can happen when you actually speak out and say you're conservative.
Yeah, the point is, and you touched on this earlier, is that, like, I think Ben Shapiro actually talks about this quite a bit, that the point is that a lot of people, kind of, normal people, they say something wrong, or they're outed online for something they said, or they wore the wrong t-shirt and there was a picture of them, then they go and apologize after the mob goes after them. And they do this, really profuse and I think disingenuous apology. Kind of, I think, I don't want to say pathetic, but it actually sometimes looks really pathetic. These grown men are like, kneeling down in front of the mob. But the point about the mob is the mob doesn't forgive, right? You're never going to win their favor back, right? You're just going to honestly, I think, lose a little bit of your own, self-esteem along the way. But related to this conversation as a whole and about canceling and then being called out in public, you're part of PragerU, and you're really like one of the more recognizable faces, obviously. The New York Times in January wrote a profile on PragerU. You probably know the article. It was titled Right-Wing Views for Generation Z, 5 Minutes at a Time. And the article started actually by talking about you. I think your name was mentioned in the first sentence, which is, I think you should be, pretty proud of.
Thank you.
And I think the article actually even said that it described you, said that you looked or had the mannerisms of a high school jock straight from Central Casting.
I love that line. It's so funny.
I don't think they wanted you to love it, but I had a feeling that's the biggest compliment you can get, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But so they used the the word when you go around college campuses and do your interviews. They're usually pretty funny. You ask college students questions like, do you support defunding the police or whatever? And a lot of times their answers I guess make some sense, but most of the time they're just hilarious and pretty nonsensical. But anyway, they describe what you do as trolling. What do you make of that characterization?
Them saying trolling is a way for them to undermine the power of what I'm doing. They can come on and say trolling as if I'm just coming on and making people look stupid. I will admit for sure that some of my videos, people have looked stupid in the videos. There's no denying that. A lot of the responses I get are pretty funny. And there are a lot of other people who do man on the streets, conservative people, who their main purpose is to make the left look stupid and to make people that they interview look stupid. But I'd be hard-pressed to find, if they did it even a little bit more research, to go look at some of my videos. Look at this one I just did with Brandon Tatum, where we went to Hollywood Boulevard. Brandon Tatum is an ex-cop in Phoenix. We went to Hollywood Boulevard, and we just gave people the facts about police brutality and changed all these people's minds. Or one I did about socialism, or about good guys with a gun. My main concern, the paramount principle of my videos, has always been to change minds. I'm not making videos just so that conservatives can go on and laugh at the left. I'm making videos that someone on the left will watch and say, wow, I see the way that he broke down this argument, or the way that he asked questions. This actually opened mind up. If you look at the way that I ask people questions, I'm very calm. I'm very nice to all these people always, because you're not going to change their mind if you get angry or trying to just debate them, you know? It's like, this is someone who I just met on the street. What am I going to do? Walk up to them and tell them why climate change isn't happening or something? Like, of course not. Like, I'm trying to change this person's mind and have them explain their rationale back to me. That's why I ask the questions in the way that I do. So their sense of saying trolling is only a way to make it seem like we're not doing real work at PragerU, that I'm not doing real work, when in reality, we have surveys at PragerU looking at these kind of things. We are changing thousands and thousands of minds from my video and educating thousands and thousands of people from these videos as well.
Yeah, honestly, probably millions just by looking at it. But
yeah.
So I guess, because, when I hear the word trolling and then just, we're describing what you're doing, I think somebody who doesn't know who you are or hasn't ever seen your videos, they assume this is just a manifestation of like owning the libs phenomenon, which is really rampant among the right, especially on Twitter. Let's make we don't really care about arguing with them or like changing any minds or hearts, but we just want to like make them look dumb. And I'm a big opponent of that strategy. I don't think that's any way to go. If anything, I think people and conservatives, they should take the high ground and treat people, even liberals and progressives who they disagree with respect. And that's what I really liked about when I saw your video for the first time. I was expecting, honestly, like, you to just kind of troll them. There's I'm not going to name any names, but there's a famous Fox News correspondent who came to my college campus up in Ithaca, New York, and, did this for a day, went and interviewed a bunch of students. And I mean, I like the guy who did it. It's Jesse Waters. I thought it was funny. I mean, I know he's just making a joke, but it was just not well received. Everybody on campus, even like independents who don't care about politics, they were like, wow, that guy is a real jerk. He just my friend's girlfriend was interviewed, and she felt like he was like kind of bullying him, honestly. She didn't really understand the joke. But when I watched your videos, you're like really calm, you're really composed, you don't get at all like take anything they say personally. You just ask them like, oh, why do you think that? Or, oh, is that so? But what about when you're presented with this evidence? Does this change your mind? And I think that's a really, really powerful quality that I think what makes your videos like so unique. And I think it behooves everybody, even on the left, but everybody who's engaged in political discourse, with each other, to kind of replicate your strategy and way of doing it.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. It's like, you see these people, you go to a college campus, and I do a lot of these interviews, right? And me being only 23 years old now, and just in college, dropped out of college, and now I'm here in Los Angeles, but just being there, and being someone who's more on the left, it's like, I know how these kids feel. They're not stupid, okay? These kids aren't all stupid. I don't want to make them look stupid. It's brainwashed. It is indoctrinated by the left on these college campuses. So I'm going and I'm interviewing these kids. I'm not, of course, there are some people who are just wickedly crazy and everything. Of course, that's going to happen. But for the most part, they're just brainwashed. And it's the university's fault. It's their parents' fault. It's the mainstream media's fault. It's Hollywood's fault for doing this to them. I can't blame them for having these kind of views when this culture of leftism is so pervasive in our culture. So when I go out and make these videos, it's not just exposing this kid and saying, this kid is stupid. It is exposing what the left has done to this country and has done to young people. And that's why I think that, I've been doing this now for about 3 years, and I started out with a lot of other people who are doing similar things to what I do, or other conservative personalities, and a lot of them have fallen off the map, and I've been able to retain a great brand and continue rising and do a lot of stuff, and I think that's part of the reason why.
Absolutely, and I really do wish you all the best, and I'm sure you'll be super successful. But I have to say, I have a question for you. I was reading Real Clear Politics the other day, as I do every day, but a few days ago I noticed they had a banner, like an advertisement that popped up for me at the top, and it actually had your face on it. It was for a Christian university in Colorado, right? So that led me to a little Google searching, and I'm not sure. Are you a student right now? Did you go back to college or university?
I am. I'm doing online classes at Colorado Christian University, actually. They are wonderful people there. I've been doing it online, majoring in communications. I dropped out of school at CU Denver, And so I actually have a deal with them about this and me helping them with marketing and stuff, and then they're doing this with me. So it's very, very cool, and they're wonderful, awesome people, and their curriculums that they have at that school is great, free from leftist indoctrination, and just gives you the real information. So a huge supporter of Colorado Christian University.
Cool. So just to get this straight, you are also a student there, and you'll graduate with a degree at the end.
I will. As long as I do my homework, I should. So
I feel like you're almost kind of like a child star, right? Like a lot of child stars, Hollywood celebrities, when they don't finish high school, they never go to college, they never do any of that. And I always think that's such a shame. Like, just because you reach like a huge level of success at some point, it's good to get an education, especially at a place that you respect and you feel like you'll learn and get valuable life skills from. You don't know when you're going to need it in your long life ahead.
Right. That's why I would go back to Colorado Christian. I wouldn't have gone back to Boulder or something or any other university. But this is a university that supports my values, and I would want to give them money. I don't want to give hundreds of thousands of dollars to some university that shames people like me and the values that I have. So it was very important that I chose a university that respected what I actually believed and did.
Yeah, no, that's great. I've had a lot of conversations like these with my friends from high school, from college, and other institutions that I've been part of in organizations, and a lot of them have taken a turn, for pretty extreme, I think leftism, and makes me and a lot of my other friends and colleagues, other alumni, pretty uncomfortable. And that begs the question, which has been on my mind for a long time, and there's been a little bit of a intellectual civil war within the conservative movement for a long time about this, that is it better for Republicans and conservatives who don't buy into the mainstream liberal ideology, is it better for them to change a system or change an organization from within? Or is it just better for them to branch off and do their own thing, right? Jonah Goldberg from National Review, he's famous for being ardently in the former camp. He believes that conservatives shouldn't leave Yale University or whatever, or leave the New York Times. The New York Times needs conservative voices, even more so, and people from inside trying to change the culture. But then on the other hand, it's not very successful, and it's a lot easier, I think, to go and find like-minded people and found our own organizations. I know I'm painting with a broad brush, but I'm curious, what are do you have a opinion on this debate?
Yeah, I have a very strong opinion. I mean, this is kind of what we talked about in the beginning with being strong about what you believe in. It's like I post that I'm in Hollywood, California. It's where I live, and everyone's like, "Why would you live there? It's so terrible. It's horrible." And it's like they live in Idaho, away from any sort of like leftist ideology. Some of these people never probably even met a leftist in their life, and it's like, I want to be where this is. How can I say that I care about what I'm doing or that I actually believe in it if I'm not willing to put myself in situations that might make me uncomfortable, that might put me in places where I have to fight against it? Like every single day in Hollywood, there's a new thing that I'm battling against or seeing. It gives me motivation to want to actually try and make a change. But there is the fact that someone has a family in California, they live in Los Angeles, their taxes are super high, and they want to move to Texas. It's like I also can't blame them for doing that. You're making your life significantly better by moving somewhere that is more conservative, more open to freedom. But for someone like me, who this is my job and I really am trying to do this, I don't see that people should ever try and leave places where conservatives are the minority. You should be there trying to fight against it. It's like, people, we have our lawsuit with YouTube, right? With, about them restricting our videos. I'm not sure if you're familiar with our lawsuit. And so many people all the time, even a lot of conservative people, they come and they say, why don't you just start your own platform? You don't need to be on YouTube, all this stuff. This very, free market conservative idea. And it's like, we don't want to be on another platform. We want to be on YouTube because that's where all the people who disagree with us are. Exactly like I said, with changing minds in my videos, that is the paramount principle. It's the same thing with our platform, that we want to be in a place where everyone is, so that people who have never heard of us can hear us. We can change all these people's minds, not just some echo chamber of people who already agree.
I think echo chamber is the right word, and we have way too much of that going on in the country these days. And I'm a huge proponent of depolarizing. the country, but that starts with, I think, discourse and people being willing to be alongside each other and truly tolerate, if not love, but like tolerate each other and each other's points of view first. So, I mean, everybody knows of Parler, like the conservative alternative to Twitter, and I mean, I'm all about coming up with competition. If anything, I think the existence of Parler is putting a little bit of rightward pressure on Twitter to make sure that it treats its conservative users maybe a little better because they now have a somewhat viable alternative. But I don't like the idea that you have conservative businesses and then you have Democrat businesses, and that a lot of conservatives feel that way. Or you have conservative areas. You have Idaho and Texas and the country, and then you have LA, San Francisco, New York, where I am, just dominated by progressives and liberals. I don't think that's healthy. That makes for a healthy nation at all, a democracy like ours. But I do think that it certainly does require everybody to have thick skin. Conservatives and conservative-minded people who live amongst liberals, but also on the other side, liberals need to get comfortable with letting the minority of conservatives in their communities speak out and say their opinions. But yeah, I totally understand what you were saying then about I'm sure you have a lot of temptations and good reasons to move to Texas, but I think it takes actual guts and commitment to the cause for you to want to stay in LA right next to YouTube.
Yeah. Also, LA is just way nicer. I like LA. The food's better than Texas. The weather's much better.
No shame on conservative-run states or cities, but honestly, I've always preferred living in very progressive areas.
Me too. That is so much better.
The culture, the food's better. It's just more fun usually. I think that goes with the stereotype a little bit about conservatives being a little more more square.
Right. Well, every single major urban city in this country, I mean, pretty much 99% of them is progressive. I mean, the biggest states, or the biggest cities in Texas, Dallas, Austin, Houston, they're all on the left too. There's nowhere safe for a conservative unless you live in a rural country or somewhere where no one else really lives. So every single urban area is a left-wing place. So to try and try and change it so it's more depolarized, it's incredibly difficult because every place where every single person is moving for jobs and things like that is just always left-wing. I think that's part of the problem with urbanization and technological advancement is that everyone gets together in one place like this and it just breeds this herd mentality, this leftist mentality that brings them all together. I know it's kind of a tangent right there, but I think there's a big problem with just urbanization in general like that.
But that's totally possible, but I don't believe in a static future, right? I do think that everything is constantly evolving and balancing, and I take the view of history that America has actually been very polarized many different times. We all know 1860, it was very polarized. We had the Civil War, and then early 1900s, very polarized. We had a Red Scare then too. 1960s, 70s, very, very polarized with all this social unrest going on. And I think we are right now just undergoing a wave. And I hope we're at the peak now, honestly. And then people kind of start lowering their guns and start trusting each other a little more. But regarding your point about urbanization, I think that as somebody now who lives in New York, and the city is definitely different because we don't have office workers anymore. You don't realize until now that they're all gone, how empty the city is, and most of the people you see when you get off the subway at Penn Station, they're actually commuters, right? But now that the offices are more or less closed and nobody's being forced to work from an office anymore, the demographics of the city are starting to change. I don't know how that'll affect the left-right divide, but I do think that there may be less of an incentive for the highly educated, Ivy League educated, whatever, who tend to lean liberal for them to want to move to cities like New York and San Francisco, Boston, and make them even a little more liberal because, hey, if you don't have to go to the office in New York, then you don't have to pay New York's really, really high taxes. You can go to Idaho and pay nothing and still get the same paycheck, just keep more for yourself. So I think that may have some implications down the line, just in a political sense, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Right. So I agree with that.
Yeah. But what do you think? You already touched on this earlier, but as a representative, I guess, the younger generation, what do you think? What should the conservative, not the conservative, like the Republican Party? They're actually the ones who come up with these action plans, right? They have the most at stake because they don't want to be the minority party forever. And right now, if you look at the polling and the demographic trends, Republicans are really always have been, but now more than ever, they lose with young people, urban dwellers, minorities, now women too, more than ever. What would you say to the Republican Party? Or if you were a strategist there, or you could talk to like the next Mitch McConnell or whoever, like what should the party be doing to try to appeal to a wider electorate?
The Republican Party needs a clear vision for America. Imagine you're a 22-year-old kid. You just graduated from college in America. You're now hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. All the jobs are being shipped overseas to China. You got some worthless degree, so you can't get a real job, and now you have to move to either some really urban, expensive city or back in with your parents because you can't afford anything else. It's like, what about republicanism or conservatism actually looks good to you? The left is coming in and saying, well, you're broke. We're going to give you free healthcare. We're going to try and pay off your student loans and give you free college. Of course, these things sound much better than any alternative that conservatives have given so far. Conservatives have no plan for America. The left has a clear plan. In 10 years, we want to get rid of fossil fuels. We want to defund the police, and free healthcare and free college. It gives people who are younger actually something to hold on to try and change the world around them, where conservatives don't have that. They need to make some sort of game plan that people can actually get behind and say, I'm excited about this because I see that the results from this plan will actually make my life better. It's going to make me more free, able to do things that I want to do. But right now, conservatives have nothing of the sort, not even close, and it's driving tons of people away.
I'm really glad you said that because that's been my impression of conservatives for a long time in general, even before I became one myself. They're kind of the party that says it like, no. They're the check on the left's excesses. The left wants to. They don't care. They don't have a budget limit, right? They don't have a border limit. They don't have any kind of limits. The sky's the limit for them, or the Republican veto, basically. But that's not a very appealing strategy. Like, oh, we don't want to spend $20 trillion on a new national healthcare program. That would probably actually help some people. We don't want to spend that money because, well, that's fiscally irresponsible. Good luck pitching that to like a 15-year-old who's going to be voting in 3 years or whoever, right?
Right. And they talk about, they say, we want conservatives say we want a morality like the 1950s, or we want wealth success like the 1980s. It's like, I'm 23 years old. I didn't grow up in the 1950s or the 1980s. I know nothing about this. It's like the plan or the vision that they try and give for America sometimes is something like that young people have no idea what that even means. Or conservative messaging talking about, socialism in Venezuela. Have you ever been to Venezuela? I've never been to Venezuela. People use that message as like an example of a failed leftist policy, but it's like we can't even see that. Like, we need to work on our rebranding and our marketing to actually get people excited about this, because as of now, there's really nothing to be excited about. I mean, I think that's why Trump was so successful, because he had clear things that he was like, okay, this is what I want to do. They didn't even have a platform this year at the RNC because of it. It's like, it's things that they're just going to get done. That's what they need to do, make a clear plan that gets people excited.
All right, well, if the Mitch McConnell or next Mitch McConnell successor is listening, here we got some ideas from under 30-year-olds. But I totally agree with you there. We need the Republican Party needs a cohesive plan, and then you said the word marketing. It needs to actually market its ideas because it stinks at it. It doesn't control most of the media or the cultural institutions or Hollywood or academia, but it needs to start coming up with stuff. PragerU, great example. Totally bottoms up kind of a private sector organization. But we need more of that, and maybe some top down too, coming from the government or whoever from the party leadership. But Will Witt, this has been a really nice but brief conversation. Really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on the important matters of today. And I hope to have you again in the future.
I would love that. Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.